Hey guys, Ash here once again for another weekly video. So I figured last week's video was pretty crap, so we'll have a bit of a proper update on where we're at. And there's still quite a bit to do, to be honest. There's lots of little things. So to start off with, I made a bit of a minor mistake when I wired up the oil system, and I've got the oil pickup sucking out of the sump into the filter, through the filter, through the accumulator system. We're running an accumulator, not a dry sump, then out through the coolers and back into the motor. Now, although that will work, it's not ideal, and we should really have the filter as the last item in the line. So if we do have any crap, or if there's a failure somewhere in the accumulator or the oil coolers, then that will get picked up by the filter. So obviously one of the things we've got to do before we look to fire the motor up for the first time is got to reroute that the oil system there. It's not a huge job. We just got to swap basically the return line over. It's not a big deal. So we've got that to do. I've had all the power steering lines made. We had proper hydraulic lines made up for the power steering system. You can see down in here. So I've just got to finish putting them on. We've opted for the high temp lines. These ones are good for 4,000 psi. It should see us through, hopefully. All crimped. We were going to go with the field replaceable, field serviceable type fittings, which if you haven't seen them before, this is a field serviceable fitting which you can actually pull apart and redo yourself. They're not rated as highly, but you can still get them, you know, quite easily good enough to do the power steering system. The beauty with it is if you do have a problem, you can replace a line out there on the track, whereas this is a -6 line, which is not what we're using, but this is a crimped line. So all the ones that we've used are crimped. They are a better connection, rated for a higher pressure. So you do get a better line having the crimped. Problem with the crimped is when you get them crimped, if you don't have the fittings lined up perfectly, you'll there's no twist in these cables. So for a cable or a hose, probably a hose that has a 90 on one end. Oh. So this hose is a perfect example. So if I sit you back there. So we've got a 90 on one end and a 90 on this end. Now if we were to lay them, I don't know if the camera's going to pick it up, the orientation of those two fittings is offset. And if you don't get that orientation right when you go and do your crimp, these hoses are steel wire reinforced, and like I'm twisting that and there's no twist. So if you don't get your orientation right, exactly how the cable's going to lay, you'll never get it on. So something to think about. So you can kind of see in here we've marked the spine when we've gone to get them crimped, so we could line them all up so we know that it's going to fit in there properly. So yeah, we've got to finish getting these in. Once I get those lines connected up and all tightened back up, onto the, you can see in here we've got the Power Steering's Solutions steering valve in there. Once we get all those lines up onto that valve and then connected up to our Power Steering Solutions rack, then we'll look to fit off or install the rest of the coilovers on the front end here. We've left them out at the moment because if they were in here we'd have no chance of getting in there and getting the work done. So a little bit of mucking around there. Then next will be I want to purge all the lines before we look to start anything. So Tom's lent me his air over hydraulic pump down here. I don't know if you can see that big bad boy. So once we get that, we're gonna purge through with a bit of pressure, purge through all the lines. We're gonna do the all the trans lines, all the oil lines. I won't use that for the fuel. I'll just disconnect and bypass the fuel pump and pump some fuel through. I just want to, if there's anything in those lines, I did clean all the lines before I attached them, but just to be sure, I want to give them a good purge. And then the other thing we're going to do is, once we've got everything hooked up, we're going to tap in and actually pre-prime the engine, since it's been sitting for so long. Pre-prime it with a bit of pressure and turn it over by hand a few times, and then we'll do that just before we're about to start it. So we've got that's going to be a lot of mucking around to do all that. So, but I think it'll be worthwhile, because these, I'm currently still running a kind of hydraulic lifter. And hydraulic lifters are very prone to fail, especially after they've been sitting for a while. So we'll see how that goes. What else have we got to do? I think I've got to finish. We've got to decide whether we're going to use this fuel regulator. So I'm not sure whether I like it. The front fitting on it was a bit dicky, and we've had to put a double, so just down in here we've had to put this double fitting in there to make it fit. We're not very happy with that. We're going to see if we can, I think it's a BSP fitting we need in here and not an MPT. It's so stupid. They send you an MPT dash a gauge, but they've bloody tapped it with a BSP. So we're going to have another look at that. None of these lines in here are done up tight either, so we've got to go over the fuel system before we get too carried away. I'm just looking at my list on the background here. So we've got the fuel system. Yes, I don't even know what I've done with it, but I've got to do a bit of a change to the fuel tank itself, in particular the way we're going to fill it. So currently, we'll move all this crap out of the way. I don't know if you can. So currently, this is the fuel filler right here. Fuel filler, fuel vent. That's the return line. We've got our two pickups. So obviously you've got to run the fuel vent out. I'll probably end up running up to the top of the roll cage and then over and down. It does have a rollover valve in there, so we don't actually have to do that, but we will. And then this is an aluminium neck, And I got a few options, but I was just going to get lazy, and I was going to take this off and just weld a cap onto that. But if I can find the right hose, maybe I'll make a fill neck and have it. The only problem with the fill neck is it's going to have to be quite high, and I don't know if I really want that, because God forbid if we roll over, you kind of want that fill neck to be at least underneath the spare tyre and probably attached. The other thing you don't realise, once the guards are on the car, you're out here, so it is hard to get in there. But you know, we don't hot fuel here in Australia, so it's not like it's a huge rush or a big deal to get in there. You know, if we started hot fueling, we could always change it and put a dry brake fuel system out the back there. But I think for them, I've got to have another look at that. I've got a nice screw cap to weld on there. We'll just see how we go. I bought that many months ago, and I have put no more thought into it. So we'll rethink about that when we get to that. So this is today's job. So we've got a lot of sensors on this truck, and two sensors which are a little bit more difficult to hook up. They're actually really easy, but just their placement in line is the oil and the transmission oil temperature sensors. Now, for the engine oil sensor, it's actually gonna get mounted down in here. I don't know if you will be able to see, but down in there where those two holes are coming out the side of the block, this usually mounts there. Okay, this is an aftermarket I don't even know what it is. It's basically part of the oil system where it just comes out and goes back in. And it normally would allow you to put like an oil pressure switch. Sometimes people put a remote oil pressure switch down there on, say, to switch an oil pressure, like a dumb light on your dash or something like that, where you don't really have the tunability of an aftermarket ECU. Or maybe even an oil temp switch if for some reason you were running one of them. But that isn't going to work for us. Let me just sit the camera like this. So sometimes in motorsport what they suggest is running flexible lines to your sensors and having them not mounted directly to the block or the engine. And that's all good. That's really easy to do with something like a pressure transducer, like something like this, because you can actually buy, this is a 1/8 MPT, this is an AN-4 fitting to a female 1/8 MPT. So then you can just screw that straight into there and run a flex line onto that, and then just mount that somewhere. You know, you could make up a little bracket that, I don't know, I just had that lying there. But that's nice and easy, and that's kind of what we are going to do with our for our fuel pressure. As you can see, this line here comes off the fuel rail, and that's so that will give us our fuel pressure, and this is actually going to mount into that line and get mounted up here against this this bar. I think it's going to go here. Just got to make a little bracket for it, so that will mount there. That's nice and simple. And in that situation where you've got this dead head type situation, that's fine for pressure. It's not fine for something like this for a temperature probe. because you're just not going to get the oil flow, and you're not going to get an accurate reading. Like, sure, it's going to read something, but it's not going to be correct. So I've got these adapters that I sort of had made up, and basically, geez, I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure this is a it might even tell you on here. This is a M12 by, I think it's 1.5 pitch thread. Yeah. So I had these adapters made up. This is before I'd thought about it too well, and I was actually going to make it so it was kind of dead-headed, but that's no good. But I'm going to be able to use these anyway, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this. Luckily for me, when they did the machining, they've left the center hole there, so I'm actually going to drill that through all the way through. And the plan is I'm going to mount this so the tip of the probe just sits in there, like at about that level there. Okay, and I'm going to cut this down and then weld it to here. So when this screws into this, just the tip will be in this area here, and we'll have this oil flow running past the tip always to give us an accurate temperature. So that's for that one, right? That's for the engine oil temp. Now the other temp that I need to sort out is for the transmission, and although it probably is easiest to just drill a hole in the sump and tap into that, I don't want to. And I want to have it in line. And the problem with being in line, you can buy something like this, say, right? Except for the problem is this is 1/8 MPT, and it's really designed for measuring pressure. You know, having a little line off that, or this would probably actually screw straight into that. Yeah, there you go. You know, you could do something like that, and that's fine. That's measuring your line pressure, but that's not going to help us when we're trying to measure the temperature. So, number one, the probe on this is too big, and this is the wrong thread to fit in there. Plus, I'm not sure if you can see, but that already blocks off that whole orifice, and we haven't even got in there yet, right? And there's not much room left around the top of this to do anything. Now, this is a dash 10 to dash 10. I've got this hex bar, aluminium hex bar. It's actually one of my sway bar links that I've just chopped down. But this is it's bored out to probably the equivalent of probably even bigger than dash 12, maybe even dash 16. But the point is I've got a good landing surface, and I've got the ability to once again drop that probe in there, and we'll get some flow, and we're not going to restrict the flow to a point where we're actually hindering anything, because this is a bigger diameter. So what the plan is I've got now where this is going to get installed. Also, I'll show you where it's going to get installed. I want to install it on the hotline, so coming straight out. So down here, see these? We got red and blue, and then we got a black. So the red and blue is dash 10, and the black is dash 8. So this is the cold side. This is coming from the coolers, and this is our hot side coming straight out of the trans. I want to measure the hot side. I don't know if that's the right thing to do or not, but that's kind of what I want to know, because like if it's hot, it's already been hot, and if it's done, and then if it's hot enough to do damage, it means the damage is already done, because you can measure the cold side, and all right, you might go, oh yeah, we're putting in this nice cold oil back into the transmission or gearbox, and you know it's the right temperature, but you don't actually know what that oil got to. And obviously the more efficient your whole cooling system is, the less hot your hot is going to get. And ideally you want your hot to never get to a point where it's doing damage to anything. So that's my reasoning why I'm measuring the hot side. If I've got it wrong, feel free to tell me in the comments. But yeah, again, we're coming from the transmission in dash 8, and we actually transition into dash 10 at the fittings there. So I plan on removing that adapter, the dash 8 to dash 10 male to male adapter, and we're going to create a male to male adapter which has the temp sensor built into it. So I've got you can buy weld-on fittings, and I've actually got some, but I've also got a heap of these hose blanks. They're aluminium hose blank, basically hose blank male bung. And I've got a dash 10, and I've got a dash 8. And the plan is, I'm going to weld that to that, and I'm going to chop it down to basically as small as I can have it, and I'll weld the dash 8 to the other side, and then more than likely have to, I don't know whether, I think I need to weld a part of this onto this, because although I've got the tap to tap this, if I tap that right in there, it ends up, it's too deep, you see it'll go right through it. So I'm thinking like something like at that height there. We'll just take, now obviously the hole where this actually comes through will still allow oil to come up to the bit that's not in the full flow, but from what I'm told, the main sensing part of this probe is done on the tip anyway, so by having that in there like that, we should get optimal temperature sensing there. So that's the plan. We're going to chop down a little probably just where the threads end, chop that off, weld that to the top, weld these two fittings on either side. Obviously they'll need to be drilled out because they're currently solid, and we'll have our inline temperature adapter for the transmission. So that's the plan today. For that, we are getting on our little video. We've gone from a 6-minute video last week to we're at 23 minutes. Jeez. I'll run you through what's left on the list though. We've got we talked about the fill cap on the thing. Fuel sensor. Oh yeah, we looked at how the deadhead's changing on there. Oh, I've got to bolt up the converter. The converter's in there. It's not bolted up. So I want to make sure that's bolted up before we fire the engine. Yeah, we've got to put all new fluids in the engine and the gearbox. We drained the fluid last week from the engine, which was a mixture of everything you can imagine. Lots of Penrite oils. I think, and I'd been using the transmission oil periodically just to pour down the bores and over the rockers. So it was well and truly a mixture. Last week we put all the rocker gear back on because the rocker gear's been off this entire time. So we weren't, so all the springs they should be like new still. They haven't been sitting in their whatever position they were left in for the last, it's going on 3 years. It's been a bloody long time. Oh, I've got to run the steam return lines off the engine. So on your LS, you have on the top of the heads, you have the ability of running steam lines. If you look in there, see those two little blue caps? That's where I've got to hook in my steam line, and they go from the front of the heads here. The back ones I've actually got blocked off. My engine's on a fair rake. It's probably exceeding what some people might say is acceptable, but I think it's on about 10 degrees, which is quite a lot. And the reason for that was to put the uni on the drive shaft at a better angle, so we could get more travel out of the rear end. Not that you really need it, but when I did the design, that was why the engine got raked so far. It was all to do with, you can only travel the rear diff up so far, and you find that, say if from 0 degrees you've got 30 degrees up and 30 degrees down on the uni, and you set your car up standard, and you go, oh well, the diff can only physically come up maybe 15 degrees, and it can only go 30 down before it starts to limit on the uni. So by tilting the engine that 10 degrees, you're basically taking 10 from that top 30. So we were using, say, 15, and now when we go to 15, we're actually on 25, and that bottom 30 is now going to 40 because we've moved that 10 degrees down, and that then gives you an extra 10 degrees worth of travel, which can equate to a fair bit. I haven't done a final calc on or measurement of what we're at, but it's a lot. It's over 30 inches. So, that's something that you'll never get that unless you change the rake on the engine. So that's why the engine's been changed there. What else we got? We got the steam lines. Yeah, so we're running a temp sensor in the rear diff as well. So I've got to do the modifications to mount the sensor on the diff, and we're going to do it in a way that obviously we can still get to the sensor, but it's going to have mechanical protection. We're going to mount it on the back side of the diff. Obviously moving forward all the time, you're going to have rock, stone, just general sandblasting coming at the front of the diff, so we don't want to have it mounted there. We want it on the back side. We need to have it low in the oil, but then at the same time you don't want to have an instance where you reverse into something and you crack your sensor off and drain all the oil out of your diff. So we're going to make up a bit of a containment system there, mechanical protection, and then obviously I haven't got a drive shaft. I've still got to get one made. I would love just to get a brand new chrome moly one made. When I started looking into it last, you just seem to just get ripped by the fact that no one in Australia does big stuff. They all do, the biggest drive shafts they kind of do is 3-inch in the chrome moly for the drag boys, all the boys doing the drag racing. So I think what I'm going to do to start with, I'm just going to take my old drive shaft in and get it re-lengthened, and I'll get a new one made as well, but I've got to do a bit more research because obviously with the Aussie dollar the way it is, if I can find someone here, I'm probably going to get I don't know exactly, but I'm hoping that it's at high angle drive lines. They'll be able to definitely do the modification of my existing drive shaft to lengthen the tube on that. But that's only I think it's a 3-inch or a 3.5 inch. I think it must be a 3.5 inch. Yeah, but I want at least a 3.5, probably a 4-inch. and preferably a chrome moly one for the a nice new one. And I want to go to the 1480 uni. Currently we've got 1350s on there, which, you know, it'll be fine. Be fine while we're running these 37s. Yeah, we can just get the truck going. Get it going. You know, I've said it way back at, I don't know if I've said it on here actually, but the plan is I'm going to build a new rear diff and run the big axles. I think they're a 37 spline or a 36 spline, which is the 2.75 inch or 2.375 inch OD axle shafts. Big Coke can things, you know, like, and then I've already got the hubs. I've got the opportunity, the potential to actually make an adapter, because my rear diff I've got currently actually has flanged spindles. They're not welded spindles, they're bolted on via a flange. See this 1.5 inch flange in here? The spindle mounts to that. So I do have the opportunity to make an adapter which the new hub bolts to. So, but I don't know. I'm not sure. I kind of want just build a new diff, have it ready to go and roll it under the car. And then when we do that, we'll up it and we'll go to a 40-inch tyre, because we designed the car for a 40. We've got the clearance for them. Will give us extra belly clearance. Yeah, obviously they're a bit heavier. You know, 37s might be fine. They will be fine. They'll be totally fine. But we can't go to a 40 on the current axles. We've only got 35-inch axles in there at the moment. 35 spline axles, sorry, not inch. Which are pushing the envelope anyway. Like, they're only in there because that's what I had. That diff can go to a 40. I can just change the drive pucks or the drive slugs and change out the spool, and we can put 40s in there. But by the time I spend that kind of money doing that, I'm better off just putting it into the new diff and building the big axles. So that's more than likely what's going to happen. If we start blowing axles, we'll just be pulling up stumps and building a new diff. We'll build it so it doesn't break anymore. Yeah, so we're going to do the drive shaft. Obviously we've talked about once the lines are in, we can put the coilovers back in. And then before we start the motor, one of the last things I've got to do is I've just got to find the top dead center and check the 0 degree for the timing, and basically set up the ECU for the ignition timing offset. And then once we've got all that, we might do a little bit of mucking around with the ECU, just double checking everything's in the correct firing order and whatnot, because I'll tell you what, it's hard work when you buy a blank canvas ECU. It's not like these OME ECUs where you know, if you hit start, it's more than likely going to try and start. This thing, if you haven't told it to do something, it's not going to do it. So, you know, if we haven't told it to fire in the right firing order, or told it where injector 1 is in the, you know, injector 1's in cylinder 1. If it's for some reason set up that injector 1's in cylinder 3 or 4, where it'll be all sorts of problems. So, just need to do a few checks. I don't think we're going to have any dramas like that. And then hopefully we'll start it for the first time, and it'll all be sweet, and then we'll be looking to send it off to get dynoed. But yeah, not really in any rush, just plodding along, and we'll see how we go. Anyway, we'll leave that video for this week there, and we'll hopefully see you all again next week. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, We've got the Team Outlaws 4x4 Facebook page also. If you haven't seen us on there, give us a follow. You know, spread the word, share the video, always helps us out. And yeah, if there's anything you want to know a bit more about, let me know in the comments, and we can delve a bit deeper into it maybe next week. So thanks guys.